shadows hide you? I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you! Never lose hope.
Here, Fred shouts.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, friend!
Welcome to episode 458 of Concede, our Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, August 1st, 2024 in the evening, coming to you from Teldrassil, California. It's me, Edelweiss. From Northrend, Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
I am not in Teldrassil, California.
But also from Teldrassil, California, we have Megasa.
Hello.
And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. This week's episode is brought to you by our producers, Number Theory, Crash, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottlecaps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Grizzly Bear, Tyler Knife, and SSJ5 Goku. And by our patrons of the week, Wash in the Wind and Rich Harang. You can go to patreon.com/CoinConcede to get perks like a thank you at the top of the show, early access to new episodes, one-on-one coaching sessions, and of course help us support the show in the process. If you would like to support the show but cannot do so monetarily, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast feed of choice, as it always helps other people find the show. So Life and Ladder. Hello, everyone. I am sitting next to Megasa because I was not going to be able to make her actual wedding stuff for logistical reasons. So I'm making you'd call it a bachelorette party, right?
Yeah.
Instead. So that is why we are slightly late with technical difficulties, because my laptop charger decided to not function, and I perpetually forget that my headset has a hardware mute button. So I'm sorry. It's my fault. It's me. I'm the problem.
And also, that's the reason that I am not in California, because I'm not as traditionally, to be a participant in a bachelorette party. So that would be weird. So I am not at all offended. And I am also happy to be in the comfort of my house and not traveling. So as much as I miss being with both of you. But
You have a standing invitation, of course.
yes. Well, maybe once my chaos at work finally settles down, maybe that will be a thing, or we will find a reason to maybe we'll have to put CoinCon Concede together and instead of BlizzCon, it's something, if they're not going to do BlizzCon again. But that's another story for another day.
Yeah. No, I'm really excited to have Eloise here. She arrived earlier today with you found out that you could get a free checked bag, and so brought 3 board games.
Oh, only 3.
They are
That's like light traveling for Edel.
okay, 3 to 5. I don't recall. They're sizable.
It is a sizable bag.
One of them is a game called Codex, which is a real-time strategy game as a card game. And I supported it on Kickstarter. Just did the $200 for the full box set. So that's probably half the weight of the suitcase. And and then, there's a couple other decent-sized board games. I didn't bring Tapestry, which is the Civilization-esque board game. So
I mean, you're only there for a couple of days.
I know, and Saturday's pretty busy, but tomorrow we have time. I actually still have work in the morning, but only for a couple hours. So
it's fine. That'll be enough time for me to edit. So
Did you bring your commander decks to get Megasa obsessed like I've been, or no?
I only have 2, and
that's all you need.
The matchup between those 2 would be unfair.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm gonna ask. I have another friend from out of town coming up tomorrow, and she definitely has commander decks. But we have many board games that we need to play.
I want a full report once the dust is settled.
Yeah. My 2 remaining commander decks are Alesha, which is built, out of date, but unkindly, with smokestacks and cataclysm and the like.
Oh, that kind of unkindly. Okay, you have land destruction in there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And Living Death, and
Oh, Living Death's one of my favorite cards, but that's another story for another day.
Just to find out if I'm really as sort of calm as I sometimes make myself out to be on the show, which, spoiler alert, I am not necessarily when actually playing games.
Yeah. I think it would take, one game for Kiki Conscripts to win out over Norin the Wary running away, as he does whenever anything happens. Yeah, it'd basically be a meme deck versus a, maybe not meta deck, but
yeah,
well-crafted deck. There's some fun, stupid things you can do in Norin, but it's definitely meant for multiplayer.
Yeah, that's not going to do well in a one-on-one situation, no. I guess. Other than that, other than the fact that you've been traveling today.
We kind of, after getting some lunch, I realized, oh yeah, it's 1 o'clock. The patch is out. Megasa informs me, yeah, the patch has been out since 10 a.m. That's when it drops over here. So, I could have played on the airport or the bus. Probably that would have been ill-advised, but we both kind of tried to jam some games to figure out what's going on in the whole half day that is the meta right now, which didn't feel terribly different, honestly.
I definitely ran into a few different things, and I don't know that this is like a post-patch thing or I just hadn't run into it, and now I ran into it, a miracle rogue type of situation. I was thinking, it's well rogue because they were getting all these coins, but that was not the point. The point is to keep bouncing Griftas until you get the deal 6 damage, and then use Sonya shenanigans to just OTK them, which they did successfully. Of course, they also got the deal 6 damage on the first try on the Grifta, but it worked out pretty well for them, and then it just has like tar slick and ways to try to not die while setting this up.
That hurts my soul.
Truly, mine as well. It's basically just the ultimate Sonya is doing stupid things, because of Tidepool Pupil. That's the whole reason the deck exists.
Yes, that's very important.
Yeah.
Breakdance and Tidepool Pupil, because you can just, I think, loop it infinitely, right? Because you get a second Tidepool Pupil after you play the one, and then you just do stuff to get another Breakdance in there, and you can Breakdance the Pupil and something else. I don't want to take the time to figure out how it works.
I mean, Sonya goes infinite with a ham sandwich, so I'm sure that there are other ways that are we're gonna find a new way to break Sonya every week between now and when it rotates, and that could just be a recurring segment on the show. Please don't. We're not going to do that, because that would just make me angry. But yeah, it's just here, like on David Letterman, he had stupid pet tricks. We can just have stupid Sonya tricks, and
I mean, blessedly, you have to do more work than just shadow stepping Lamplighter now. So I do think that mildly opens up some things for these decks that were getting squeezed by both Lamplighter Rogue and Infinite on Kiliax, just kind of pushing out every other thing that goes late. Well, and Concierge Druid, right? Concierge Druid is still around, but
yeah, we figured it would be, because and we'll talk at length about the patch, but yeah, making Concierge cost a little more is not really going to slow them down that much. I did try. I'm like, let me see if Incendious Shaman is going to work. Nope, no, that's not happening.
Are you sure?
Edel got a very good game.
You're much better at that deck than I am. I just run into hand size problems and then end up burning stuff, or being just trying to get stuff out of my hand, and then things go badly. But
I seem to be really good at making decks that have hand size problems these days. Because the other one I really have been enjoying right now is a Projection Orb mage deck.
That was the other deck I tried. That also did not go well.
Yes, well, I did lose to a Reno priest who happened to dirty rat my fizzle, or else I don't think they had any shot.
And also somehow they got your tsunami.
Well, yeah.
What, from a Baleful Banker? Or?
Yeah, they played 2 of them. So the first one pulled something I didn't care about, and the second one pulled the tsunami. And since I've built it to only have one of each thing, so that orb, so that I can be defensive, like truly have the defensive tools for aggro decks, and then basically build your own orb to kill them. Like, stuff cast in ascending order, so it'll clear their board no matter what's there, and then go Firelands Portal into Sunset Volley into Tsunami. It used to be Tsunami, then Sunset Volley.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that. I'm not thrilled about that change.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I have a lot of feels in general. So
the perfect King Tide curve, you got that as well. That was pretty good.
That is pretty good. I killed a Death Knight because turns out when you get new Tsunami'd on turn 5, it's a challenge to come back from that. Did you know?
And they couldn't play anything because they were on the coin. So their spells cost 5 and they didn't even have 5 mana.
That's just mean.
I mean, they could play minions, but there was nothing that was going to deal with. I looked over and I was like, they're doing a lot better than I expected. And Adel's like, they're so dead though. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
It's like they're at 10 life.
But they cleared the board at 10 life, sort of, and now they're gonna die. I haven't had a chance to play it. I saw that Tonberry hosted a sort of self-damage aggro priest, and I did actually get destroyed trying out Evolved Shaman again by a self-damage aggro priest. So much so they didn't accept my friend request. Probably thinking that I was going to flame them or something. But I lost quickly enough that I didn't have a chance to see a lot of the list, actually. I did also have the lethal today, though, where someone had a Brain Masseuse, and I had an Amonthul, and I discovered the 10/10 Rush Beast, Mukla. And they had
eight
life, so they were
pretty
dead.
Good. 6 mana Pyroblast.
That's almost as fun as Golganething it.
Yeah, not nearly. It is only half the damage of the Golganeth on it.
Oh, that could come up a lot.
There's a lot of shamans running around right now, so that could actually really.
I want to see the Trolled In video where there's been some back and forth, and someone just casually plays a Brain Masseuse in the mid game at 20 or less life and then dies. That will be exciting.
I think at least one person has already posted in the Discord that they did that to someone, and it was very satisfying. Yes. Which I imagine it really was. I think that was early in the expansion, but people are trying it out again. This self-damage priest, it was very Painlock-esque in that they just had no fear, did a ton of damage to themselves, but killed me before I could get a board that survived or a Zarimi turn going on. I lost not a bunch of ranks, but lost a fair number of games trying other stuff, and then lost my Derv and climbed back up with Zarimi.
As one does, yeah.
Which, for my weekly Zarimi update, I'll keep it short. I've already changed the list again, obviously. And I actually reached rank 163 and then tweeted it at SSJ5 Goku's suggestion, because he was specking me and said, this is the kind of rank where people will really pay attention. So it still has Vol'jin, but I took out the rest of the Hunter cards. I took out Catch of the Day, even though I think that's a good card, but I was just running out of gas, so I put the Salesman back in for that little bit of cycle. And then I took out the Fishing Rod because it was just felt a little slow and awkward. I have seen that Shiling Hung the is playing a version with the 2 adaptive amalgams and no Clay Matriarch and 2 rods, and they're at rank 10 and it's working for them. So maybe I'm just not giving them a try. But what's working much better for me is I took out the rod, I took out Magatha, and I put in 2 Carrion Grubs. This was partly because Druid is not a class you want to give your spells to, and I kept seeing a lot of Druids. Even the Scale Replica, they're like, sure, thanks. And now I can draw my Fi.
Oh, yeah, now I get my Fi and I get to buff it. Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, so you don't want to give them that either. So, and the Carry-On Grub does give you a 1-cost thing. I hadn't been running Pip in the version that I tweeted that got picked up by HS Top Decks and stuff like that. It doesn't have Pip in it, but I commented under you might want to put Pip in. I think what the move is actually put Pip in instead of Ziliax now because of the change to Ziliax. So it's just really hard to get down. It felt a little bit win more. It is really powerful still when you get it down, but it was like when it was most powerful was coming from behind against another aggro deck. And now that's not really how it's helping you. I think if you still have a bunch of like little 1/2 whelps because you stuck a whelp wrangler, and then you play like 3 of them in the Ziliax. We will talk about this in Decksplanations, but basically Ziliax, the ticking module, only discounts off your own minions now. It costs 1 less, but that means it is never free.
Yeah, always costs at least 1.
Unless you played Want to Hear My Playlist.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think the big power of it in Zarimi Priest, right, was the counting enemy minions, and then you could get copies of it, right? Copies of 0-cost cards is the name of the game in Zarimi Priest, so...
Yeah, but to do that now you need like 2 slots open, so now it's costing at least 2. So, or the first one does, and then you pay 2 to copy it, then you pay another 1 to play the next one, and that's assuming you already had 5 minions. So, it does sound kind of first world problems. Oh no, our huge board buff is not 0 mana anymore, but it actually felt I had enough games where it was stuck in my hand that I swapped that out for Pip. And the Carry-On Grub, it is the 5/4 4-mana card that has Battle Cry, draw 2 cards. They go in a 1-mana suitcase. You see what they are, which is very important because you can tell whether it's worth to paying the 1 mana to get them out. Pip can copy it if it's something that you feel like you want to copy. It discounts your Drifter, and it doesn't give any spells to the Druid opponent. And I've actually mostly not been gassing out. The Mixologist was super important when I was seeing even more aggro. Still is just really flexible. I've been seeing it in a lot of my opponent's decks of all kinds. I think more people are realizing like this is just a good card in a lot of decks. And sometimes that deal 3 damage is important. So that is the version that I'm playing now. I still have Vol'jin because Vol'jin is really good, actually. If they play a Fi, normally that would be just like an impossible wall. Now it's not. If they have a Giant, then you don't care. It has super helped against Painlock. It's not favored still, but super helps if you have the Vol'jin. Like, I would even keep it against a Warlock, probably. Yeah, so I've been having fun with that, but I know I do every time the Zarimi update, so it's still working for me, is what I'll say, but I should try some other priests as well, I think, and some other decks. Played a little bit of Incendious Shaman. Didn't work out as well for me as it did for Edel, but I only gave it 1 game, so sample size of 1, I lost. Deck's terrible, obviously.
You mean you didn't have 5 damage eruptions hitting your opponent over and over?
I died before I could try.
One time I actually got everything to come together. I forgot what I was doing, and I played a Needle Rock Totem on the turn before I was going to go off, and then everything just came out at one damage, and then I was like, oh yeah, I should not be playing right now because I am distracted and tired. I mean, we've already talked around the patch. We're not even talking about the patch till Decksplanations because we have other big news that happened this week. So we should probably stop beating around the bush and get into that.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
So, yeah, we had a patch, and we're going to talk about that in a bit, but we also had the announcement of Battlegrounds Season 8. And this is going to have a new seasonal mechanic called Trinkets. So, Trinkets are kind of like quests, except that you get the effect, they're passive effects that you're going to be able to buy in a shop that comes after turn 6 and one, or I guess before turn 6. And one comes as part of turn 9. And they are additional passives that you will be able to buy at a certain point in the game, or I guess you'll have to buy one. You have to choose one, and they come at different gold costs, so it's going to affect how much gold you have for the rest of that turn, but then they have varying powers that will change the way that you play for the rest of the game. So they're kind of like quests, except you get it immediately, but they also cost gold. If you've played TFT, these are augments. They've had augments in TFT for since I think set 3 or 4. But those are also have been in TFT for that long because it has been a really good effect. Like this kind of a passive comes in once you've already kind of gotten direction, so you can use what you know about your board to kind of pick something to enhance the direction that you're going in. They're not really early enough for you to be able to get direction from the trinkets, but I guess that's probably also leaving room so that they can bring quests back in mid-season, which I would expect is probably why they're not doing anything at turn 3, because that's when quests come in. So this way you could have quests, or I guess Denathrius is still a thing in Battlegrounds, so you could do that too. But so like some of the examples that they have for us are Booty Bay Brew, 3 gold. Whenever you spend gold, give a friendly pirate +2/+4. That seems that seems useful. Just kind of reroll 10 times and buff your whole board. That seems good.
I think that one is. So it says that they have a lesser and greater version. So I think that's if you pick it again, right? That there would be a weaker version.
Well, not again.
And then
not again.
It's the greater version.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it costs a little bit more.
Yeah. There's going to be lesser ones on turn 6 and then greater ones on turn 9. Yeah, so the other one is Colorful Compass, which is 3 gold, get 2 random Naga. At the start of each turn, gain 2 more. So these are going to be, I mean, turn 9 is also, you generally, I think you get to turn 9, but by then, this is probably not saving you at turn 9 if you're that far behind, but these are supposed to be fairly impactful changes to the way that you will play that, will kind of reward you for having direction, having a clear idea of what comp you're going into, or it might actually change the comp you're going into if you don't have really clear direction. So it's I'm interested. I mean, again, I really like augments in TFT, so anything that looks like augments in Battlegrounds has my attention. And it's been a really positive change there, so I'm interested to see what this looks like when we get it in Battlegrounds, which will be going live on August 20th, which is not this, well, depending on when you're listening to this, not this coming Tuesday as when we're recording this, but the following Tuesday. So like a week and a half from now. There's also a new hero, Marin the Manager. So he's going to give you another trinket and a turn early. So on turn 5, you get to choose another lesser trinket to buy. Given how powerful these are, it's hard to say what trinkets we're looking at, but another lesser trinket seems like it'll be powerful, and that'll be worth the hero power because that's basically all he does is that. So that better be worth it.
And it also, it depends on whether you're it sounds like they're trying to make it so that you're always offered something that you want. You have what looks like 4 choices, and they say that it's not only which ones are offered is not only influenced by like the minion types in the game, like obviously you wouldn't get the pirate one if there's no pirates, but also that it's influenced by your hero and your warband. So I'm curious how that works and plays out, because it would certainly feel bad to get nothing that's interesting. It's also going to be interesting on like how consistent is it? Can you basically build toward a particular offering the way that people would build duels decks toward something? Like how much is the warband can you build towards, I'm making my comp so that I'm going to hopefully get this trinket.
It is worth noting it doesn't appear that you can re-roll these, so it is going to give you 4 things and you're going to have to choose one of them. But yeah, that's, again, if I'm making the comparison to TFT, that's very similar to what TFT does. They generally like these would be like the second and third augments. The first ones are random, and then the second and third one are influenced by your board. So that sounds fairly similar. I can tell you when you have no augments that work with what you're doing, it really sucks and you're really far behind. So this has to kind of look at your board and give you something useful, because it's such a massive thing to waste a trinket, I would imagine, if it's anything like augments. like missing on that or wasting an augment is like, forget it.
Right. And this also gives them a little bit of a balance lever if there's a particular trinket that's broken for one hero and not other heroes. They can just make it more expensive for that hero or not show up for that hero.
Or if one type is really, dominant, then they can make the trinkets more expensive or whatever. They could do that too. So, or they can bring those trinkets down. So there's a lot of balancing things that they can do. There will be reveals throughout this week and next. They'll be doing one minion type every day between now and August 14th. For every day that's following today, it'll be at 10 a.m. Pacific, which is 1 p.m. Eastern, if you are in the one true time zone, which I am the only one in right now, but I will still keep that till I die.
Wouldn't that be Greenwich?
Shh. We don't talk about that. There will also be a preview event, like a theory crafting style event on August 19th. For APAC, it will be 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. Pacific. And for the other regions, it will be 9 a.m. to 3 a.m. Pacific, which is noon to 6 p.m. Eastern. So check that out. There'll also obviously be a track refresh with new emotes, new hero skins. And you will be able to get access to that if you buy into the Tavern Pass. So that's exciting, and there will be a lot more coming out about that over the coming week. There is also a golden pack in the shop as part of the anniversary celebrations that we were talking about last week. There have been bugs with it. I would hope that if you're listening to this on the podcast, I would imagine that's been resolved now. I am not sure as we're recording this live.
It worked for me today.
Okay. Yeah, I've been hearing mixed results, so we'll see. I'll probably have to do that for science and see if it works for me. But yeah, so go in and get your Golden Perils in Paradise pack once it's not bugged.
Are we saying the acquiring is bugged or the opening was bugged?
I think it just didn't show up. Like you would press the button and then nothing happened. It would say you claimed it and you didn't have the pack. So hopefully that has been fixed. Obviously, that's something that they want to. So hopefully that's resolved. But yeah, if not, then just wait a bit and it'll show up. If you got in a little bit too early, it'll show up. The hat is on top of it, so it will get fixed, guaranteed. When is a question, but it will get fixed. So that is that's that. Also, we have some other shop updates. So we have two new signature bundles, or actually one new signature bundle and a diamond bundle. So we have a diamond King Tide bundle. So Edel, you can get that your orb deck, and that is $59.99 or 6,000 runestones for a diamond King Tide, and then two signatures from Perils in Paradise, so you could finish your collection. You can also there is a signature spells bundle, which has 2 signature Corpsicle cards, 2 signature Tsunami cards, and 2 signature Food Fight cards. That is $35 or 3,500 runestones.
That's the one I want.
Yeah. The art is gorgeous, particularly the Tsunami is gorgeous.
Yeah.
$35 is a lot, but if you are so inclined.
It is less than 60, which is the
that is true. I have run the numbers, and that is in fact true. Yes.
Math teacher can confirm.
So there is also a Fireheart, or shall I say Surfheart, portrait for Shaman, and a Blingtron, or rather Skatetron bundle for Rogue. Those are both $9.99 USD or 1,000 runestones for the portrait and 5 class packs. And then returning for $6.99 USD or 1,000 gold are Zombie Queen Scarlet for Death Knight and Cherry Blossom Lunara for Druid. So if you still have gold left over, if you bought enough bundles that you have enough gold left over and you want to get some portraits, you can do that. Well, the Zombie Queen Scarlet portrait I own is quite nice. I have not picked up the Lunara one, but I probably will. That's the news. Oh wait, no, it's not the news. There was a balance patch, but we're gonna have all of the explanations to talk about that. So let's just do that right now.
All right, so we had a patch 30.0.3, which had quite a few nerfs and also buffs, as well as some bug fixes. And we'll start with the nerfs. And some of these were somewhat expected. We did get a teaser, as usual, a couple days before on Twitter. And so the nerfs were Hydration Station and Inventor Boom. Both now say to resurrect different minions. So you can only get one Unkiliax. Although, very, very small asterisk on that. Apparently, what makes the same Ziliax is having the same 3 modules. So the 2 that do something, and then the cosmetic one. So theoretically, if your opponent has a different Ziliax, which could include only just different cosmetically, and you somehow steal it and it dies, then you can resurrect both of them. This is not likely to happen very often, but Yogg exists. So if that happens to you, it is not a bug. At least it is a possible thing to happen. But in general, you're only going to be seeing one Ziliax resurrected by either Hydration Station or Inventor Boom. So that incentivizes not only running Unkiliax. We also had, speaking of, the only part of actual Ziliax that was touched was the ticking module, is now for friendly minions.
They did shave a mana off as well, but
yes,
that's because since it is only friendly, being 7 mana instead of 8 means it can still only ever cost 1 and still fit on your board. If it costs 0, you have no
ticking
space.
pylon, that is.
Yes, ticking pylon specifically. Yeah.
Which is the one that you generally care about. I mean, ticking is getting run with perfect in the non-flood decks, but
not anymore.
It was. I don't know if it is. I don't know what the hell Zilly actually run. I'm sure somebody will find another broken combination that's left because that's just been the way that this goes, but
I was seeing a perfect twin.
You can go perfect haywire and it's totally respectable, right? If you if your concern is not the big swing of perfect twin in the late game, then and you more want to fill in some gaps in the mid game, then perfect haywire is a 7/6 Ziliax, right? That has all the fancy defensive keywords and doesn't actually hurt you because it deals 3 to you, but has lifesteal.
Yeah, and you'll have things like hand buff that are still running like Twin Haywire and stuff like that. Those are more edge cases, but they're still going to be Ziliax not dead, by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I would not just do Ziliax. And if you are wondering, do I craft Ziliax? Probably you still should, if for some reason you haven't yet. But I think that the ticking pylon still makes sense in Shaman or Demon Hunter. If you have the sigil that summons 3 1/1 pirates at the beginning of the turn, and they have charge, so they're going to be able to attack right away, and you know that they're discounting your Ziliax by 4 mana you spent last turn, right? And they have lots of other ways to spend 1 mana, create 2 minions with Pop-Up Book if you're Shaman, or the Murloc Grofin if you're Shaman. So I think the ticking pylon makes more sense in a deck like that than it makes in something like Zarimi, where you have to already have the board. It might be that it's still correct to have it. I'm not certain yet. But it's noticeably harder to get down and less of a come from behind, I drew it, you didn't aggro deck. I think that's good because it was very much a punish your aggro opponent for developing kind of card previously,
or even your not aggro opponent, right? Even if your control opponent is just playing a pop-up book, right? Those are still things that help towards or you're playing the one that makes the 2/4 the 2/4 ice guys that are drinking the drink on the beach, Frosty Decor. There are cards like that it still punish you for doing that. But and I do kind of wonder if this will get Shaman, like the Evolved Shaman in particular, to drop the Muck pools, just because that's taking up a slot on the board that's making Ziliax more expensive.
Maybe.
You know, I mean, it is very good to get to turn the Sea Giant into a Chain Guardian, but I also, it might, with it being a little bit harder to get Ziliax down, I wonder if those still stay there in favor, instead of getting put in for like another minion.
Maybe you go down to 1.
I think it's still really good when your goal is to like Wave of Nostalgia and then evolve the bad hits.
Yeah.
But
even when you do that, like usually the bad hits are like cheap minions that it doesn't really do all that much for. So
like
it's not always, but it's less likely that you're gonna get like I know Brand's not in the pool because it's in current standard legal, but something like a Brand, right, would be like the thing that you would want to do. But very often you're getting like a Priestess Valish or something like that. That it's like, okay, well now I get a 2-drop array.
There are some stinkers, right?
Oh, I know. I know.
You've got the Dino Tamer Brand, right, which is 7 mana 2/4.
Yeah.
You've got Hyreek the Bat, which is an 8 mana 1/1. You've got
Hyreek the Bat, man. I haven't even rolled that. I was playing a fair amount of Evolve Shop, and I never rolled a Hyreek, but I would have been salty if I had. Yeah.
I got completely messed up by an Ice Howl today. Because it doesn't look like it's a minion that essentially has perennial rush, but can never attack face. It says charge, can't attack heroes, because there was no rush at the time. But it's green because it's charge, not rush. So I really thought I could go face with it, and totally messed up my turn because of that.
And then you realized it was a bad card. And then you realized it was a legendary. So it was a really bad card. Oh, Ice Howl.
Yep. Oh man, Ice Howl. I think I tried to fit that into a deck at one point, and that was a bad idea. Yeah. There was a reason I remember playing that in constructed deck. I don't remember what the reason was. It was probably a bad reason, but I remember that being in deck for some reason.
Yeah. Ziliax is gonna be around, gonna have some new forms. I mean, this is kind of the interesting nature of balancing this card, right? As you do some modules and then people migrate to other ones. And I think the sort of stealth nerf here is actually not to the ticking pylon, but to Rogue specifically with the ticking perfect, because there are a couple other decks, usually like Rainbow DK, that maybe used ticking perfect. Yeah. It was the occasional defensive pick for those that were like, I want something cheaper than Twin Perfect. But Rogue wanted something that they could reduce to 1 so that they could play it on a Sonya turn in aggro matchups. And it just pleases me to no end that is now impossible.
I'm so upset for them. It's really sad. I really hate that there's one less thing in the world that they can abuse with Sonya. That's terrible. My heart's bleeding.
Yeah.
Don't worry, there's plenty of other things that one can abuse with Sonya still.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, there's one less thing that they can abuse with Sonya too, which is Lamplighter.
That is very true. So Lamplighter went from 3 mana to 4 mana. And crucially, this means that when you Shadow Step it, it now costs 2, which is not 1, and Sonya cares about 1. That, I think, was why I was seeing that sort of Miracle Grifta Rogue instead of a Lamplighter Rogue, which definitely seems like a higher skill cap, as they would say, deck. Definitely, they were going to the rope every turn, not because they were BMing, but because it was clearly hard to figure out the turns and then required a lot of APM that would be difficult on mobile, although some people do make that work, which I have respect for. I had a tweet go like mildly viral where I just made a meme of, in the Olympics, the sharpshooters, a lot of them had like the very fancy headgear, right? And there was that like one South Korean woman who looked especially cool and went viral for that. And then there was that one Turkish shooter who appeared to be completely casual and wearing no special equipment. In fact, he actually had on some earplugs, but you can't see that in the photo.
Oh, earplugs. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think they have to. Like, that's if you're shooting, I think you kind of have to.
Right. Even with like an air gun, and also you don't want the crowd distracting you. And but he's just like casually standing there, regular glasses. So my juxtaposition was that basically the two types of competitive Hearthstone players, one playing on a gaming PC with deck tracker, 20 tabs of stat sites, and headphones, or playing on mobile while making dinner and watching the kids. So you can tell which one of us is a parent here.
Yeah.
Because Edel just waved her hand when I listed the second one. Anyway, for people who like do that and, well, respect for any type of deck that you're playing, but especially the like APM decks on mobile, like
No,
just
Yeah. No.
I think we had Leptin in the Concede listener series played like Sonya Rogue on mobile and won. That is impressive.
I played some whatever we're calling the Chalice Druid on my phone at lunch this week, and yeah, that's a lot of chalices to play in a short period of time on with stubby fingers. So yeah,
When you realize the animation takes an age to like reveal the next chalice down,
Yeah.
Oh well, if you after you've done that a couple times, you kind of rotate between the chalices to make sure that you're maximizing the time. You know, that's a rookie mistake to wait for one chalice.
I had a game today where I got wrecked by animation times because I was trying out a Rye Cleaver deck, and after finally deciding, okay, yeah, I'll just go in here, I make my second swing, and I'm like, oh god, the rope's burning, and it's still doing the like making a sandwich animation. Oh no, play it, and then I hero powered instead of playing.
It wouldn't show up in time. Yeah.
Well, I also had a tweet, not quite go viral, but it got enough views for people to start arguing with me in the replies, which was just replying to this and saying, and just a screenshot of this, of the Lamplighter change, and saying Shadow Step claims another victim. Because
oh no,
why
would you do that?
Because I have a reputation to keep up. So, but I mean, like, the Lamplighter decks have been fine. And really, it's like Elemental Mage and Elemental Shaman have both been kind of on the decline anyway. And it's really Rogue that just has like the absurd damage output, because you can Shadow Step it, make it one, and then you have Sonya's, and that just makes them all multiply. So yeah, a 3-mana Pyroblast is probably something that needs to be addressed, but also a 4-mana Pyroblast on turn 10, because it's not a Pyroblast until turn 10 because of the way that the deck works, isn't going to really be that much different if you're playing one or two of them. It's really going to affect, like, even like if you were playing, like, the Elemental Mages have started to run like Brewmasters,
right,
to be able to bounce it. Even that's still doable. You're not going to be, the only thing that's going to cut down from the mages is sometimes you would get a bonus Lamplighter off a Synthesize, and that would keep you from playing 3 in one turn.
Sure.
Right. But other than that, like, okay, so you have to do that over 2 turns. That's not really that big of a deal for Mage or for Shaman. But for Rogue, which counts on being able to discount it to 1 to be able to get 2 more of them with the, or I don't know about 2 more of them, but like more of them with the Sonyas, or play a bunch of them, then bounce around everything that you just played, right? Like, that's a big deal. And that, I think that's really the reason that it got nerfed, not necessarily Shaman and Mage, which were fine.
Yeah, I mean, I like that it is hit more in Rogue than in those classes, right? Now, it is significant, right, in the case of the Brewmaster situation, that you're increasing by 2 mana, effectively, what you're doing there.
I mean, you can hold for the next turn, but the fact that you have to hold for the next turn or wait till turn 10.
You have to do it over 2 turns now,
But they have other good targets, right? If you bounce the elemental that makes copies of itself, and you get a bunch of 5/4s. Like, I like Brewmaster in that deck anyways. But yeah, Lamplighter, I mean, just wait until the meta, like, slows down again, and then people are looking for that from hand damage deck, and they make Lamplighter Rogue again, and it's just different, right? Because you play the mini that makes your next thing cost 3 less, and now your Lamplighters cost 1 again, because 4 is also a magic number in Rogue, just a different one.
Yeah. And like, I don't necessarily, like, I'm not necessarily angry at Shadow Step for this, but also I love pointing out that Shadow Step is still a problem. And maybe if it wasn't around, we wouldn't have to nerf all these things. And people just really like disagreeing because people love Shadow Step. So I'm fine with that. I enjoy Pokemon.
Yeah. Shadow Step is cool.
Shadow Step is the quintessential rogue, and that's why people love it, and that's why you hate it. Because
you know what I say to that is that absence makes the heart grow fonder, and we can move on.
Yeah, we won't turn this into Shadow Step the podcast.
Yes.
So that was the Lamplighter change, and then we had 2 nerfs affecting, Concierge is technically a neutral, but 2 nerfs affecting Druid. Concierge went from 3 mana to 4 mana, and Chia Drake's stats went from 3/5 to 2/4, so a reversion of that buff that it received a while ago. And I was still seeing, they basically said in the patch notes that they didn't want to hit this deck too hard.
I can read it. I have it in front of me. So Concierge Druid is a deck that can follow up early tempo plays with lots of burst damage from hand, sometimes a little too early in the game. The deck is very, very powerful, but we like that it's a new deck and that the meta game has been adapting to it instead of folding. These changes slow down the deck's early combo turns a little and weakens mid-game plays, but maintain the basic play pattern of the deck. If these changes aren't enough, we'll make further changes in our next balance window. So, yeah, we could have an argument, and I'll invoke Host Emeritus Bodicus by saying that, maybe these cards should say and not less than 1 when we're discounting, because that's really the issue here. And I guess it's a question of, do you believe that Chalice going to 0 is a bug or a feature, right? That's really what it comes down to. Clearly, the design team feels, at least for now, that it's a feature, and they just want it to not have the turn 6, turn 7, I assembled Voltron or Exodia, and now you're dead. We'll see how annoying that gets. It's also a matter of the things that could kill Druid were also being very held back by the fact that Unkiliax was a thing. So if there are more decks that can kind of flood the board early and get under the Druids without having to worry about also having to deal with Unkiliax and how they're going to win against an Unkiliax, maybe that's enough to keep the Druid population down, because that deck does, if everything doesn't align perfectly, that deck does take a little bit of time to get going, and you can get under it.
Especially with the Chia Drake. The Chia Drake going from 3/5 to 2/4 does, and they still have a Desert Nest Matron, which is a powerful card. But that, I think the 3/5 to 2/4 does affect the just presence on the board that they have. So Chia Drake is a tempo loss, and not just the Dragon Concierge Druid, which is of course what they had all become, actually could make a somewhat decent board that would make it hard for those aggressive decks to just ignore their board and go face, or would allow them to fight back on the board while they're setting up their Concierge turn. I definitely think in terms of the design, when they made Concierge, I'm sure they were thinking of trying to get things to 0, because that's a card where now at 4 mana, you have to either have things cost 0 or discount 4 cards that you're playing in the same turn as the Concierge, probably, for it to even be worth playing. So, what is the point of this if not to make free or semi-free drinks?
Well, and the flavor also, it was very specific, right? Concierge is giving you free drinks, right? You are getting complimentary drinks. Many of the drinks cost 1 mana, and so if they're coming from a different class, right, then if you are touring, then those drinks are complimentary. I am glad that this will both make it a little bit easier to deal with some of that mid-game board in Chia Drake, and that with Concierge being a teensy bit more expensive, maybe some of those kills will be pushed back a bit later. I still ultimately have concerns about Druid. Maybe this is always the thing, right? It's either the meta is hostile and they are getting run over, or they obliterate any slow deck, right? Being the ramp deck, and especially when you are the ramp I go over 10 mana deck, we saw that with Guff, it just strangles out other late game strategies. And I would not be surprised if before its tenure is through, New Heights does not give a mana crystal anymore. Like, that it's just increase your maximum mana by 3, right? So you're not looking for it on curve. It's just like something you need to get going once you get around 10 mana. Because right now they have 6 turn 3 ramp cards, right? You gift for Wild Growth, you play New Heights, or you play the dragon that ramps, right? So they are extremely consistently getting that ramp going. And the fact that one of those ramp spells also gives them that, exceed 10 mana benefit. I had a game today where my opponent was on 15 mana to my 6, 8, maybe 8.
And that was not a concierge druid.
Did they Doomkin you?
They did twice.
Okay, well that'll do it. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, well, that was I think, going with one of the buffs that we'll talk about in a second to Tsunami. But because a lot of the concierge druids weren't even running New Heights, because the idea is they're dead first.
Sure. Yeah.
And you have the Splish Splash Whelp as well. But sometimes you don't even necessarily need the Splish Splash Whelp. But I mean, I do think it's fair to not want to kill this deck. A lot of people have enjoyed the concierge druid. It was not unbeatable, but I think the later druids with New Heights and large ramping certainly is less fun for me to face. I understand that it's popular.
Well, and it's actually like lower effort for them too, right? If people are disincentivized from concierge because of the slight balance change, I'm sure some people will go back to it. And now they're doing the Doomkin thing. I don't like getting Doomkinned better. Like,
yeah.
And getting hit for 16 from a Trog Gem Tosser because they, do a bunch of stuff, swipe away your board, and then are like, oh, and Gem Tosser takes 16 from this 3 mana card. Like, oh, it was bad enough when it was 10.
Although my favorite game that you had today, I think it might have been a warrior opponent instead of a druid, but you found what's the name of the card? The Rock Duel card.
Oh,
yeah, the ETC.
Yeah, that was good.
I think a warrior, and they had been drawing and also gotten themselves to 16 mana, and it's a lot harder to spend all your mana every turn when you have 6 more mana. So eventually they lost the Rock Duel.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple when you have a mere 10 mana as a mage.
And infinitize the Maxitude, very importantly.
So I just kept picking 6-cost spells from Infinitize if I could help it. And that is a hero power, the 6-cost spell, and Infinitize. Keep getting that finale. Yeah, they took like 28.
Good. Yeah. That'll teach them.
Oh.
I won't teach them, but yeah.
It's not a situation that they run into all the time. So that was the nerfs that we received, and we also got a lot of buffs.
Before we go on to the buffs, we'll just remind folks that there's full dust refunds for 2 weeks following this patch that came out today. If you're asking, should I nerf this, or should I dust this, rather? With the exception of Ziliax, the answer is yes. Go dust it. If you find that you're still going to want to play it, you can always recraft it. If you wait to see and then you forget, then you don't get the dust back. So that's something we say every time, but there are some people who've never heard it before. So if you are thinking, should I dust this? Go into the collection manager, type refund, and everything that doesn't say Ziliax on it, go ahead and dust. And then you can always recraft it later.
Yeah. The refund keyword is really helpful. There's a lot of really helpful keywords if you're not aware in the collection manager. Like missing is one that I use all the time because I'm on the other end of the collection spectrum. So, all right. So we had like 10 buffs here.
It's a lot.
It's quite a few. So Rye Cleaver went from 7 mana to 5 mana, but the sandwich was increased from 2 mana to 4 mana.
People haven't figured this one out yet. I do think it's powerful, and I hope someone makes a deck. I did some light experimentation with, admittedly, like very all-in version, which probably isn't the answer. And, when it does the thing, it's a lot of early pressure. The fact that you can Trail Mix on 2 to Rye Cleaver on 3 is intense, right? I was trying to do a silly thing, which is to like you just play the taunt pack, and that's what you put into play, right? You put those in the sandwich, and just like 5 random taunts, but you get to put them directly into play.
And then you can play your Ticking Zilliax right behind it.
But you still run on Killiax, right? It's still in there. But like, Beached Whale is huge.
That is a lot of health. 20 is a lot of health.
And you know, you can Thunderbringer, which can pull Monstrosity and Beached Whale. So like, there's something there, but I don't know quite yet what the right balance between like from playing 2 instrument techs to like playing some more defensive tools. Like, where's the scale there?
I will say, I really do wish they'd waited on this, because like I really like the fact that as frustrating as it might have been to play for like the last week with the meta that we had, I did appreciate them taking a little bit longer before locking in buffs and then having this longer, or nerfs rather, and having this longer window for the nerfs. I really do wish that for some of these that we'd waited a little bit on some of these buffs, because I don't think there's any way you can know if the Rycleaver not having seen play for the last 2 weeks had anything to do with the card, right? The fact of the matter is that there was just a better way to do exactly what the Rycleaver was doing with Infinite on Killiax. And I would have loved to see if the weapon would have seen play after we took away the Infinite on Killiax approach, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a couple here on there are some things that got buffed on here. I'm like, yeah, fine. Like, those classes weren't even seeing play. Like, we'll talk about the Hunter one. That's probably fine. But this one is like, it's pretty clear that that strategy with like Hydration Station and, you know, getting a bunch of big taunts out early was there, but you didn't need the weapon for it. It wasn't that the weapon wasn't good enough. It's that the weapon could have been free and it would have been the same result.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. Now, it is seeming, based on, I don't know, I don't think anyone's posted a Rycleaver deck yet, that maybe it did need the assist, but it really feels like they just wanted to avoid the Rusticon's Rumble allegations, and so just stepped on the gas a bit. But it is baffling to me, because like, some of them are spooky. Rycleaver and one we'll get to later is like both spooky in sense of its effect is a little more powerful, but it's not a buff so much as a change, because it's more mana too. But many of them just feel kind of superfluous. Like, okay, is this? I guess this is better, but I don't know that strategy is gonna do anything. Like, natural talent. I don't know why you picked that one.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, well, we'll get there. Yeah, I mean, there's some of these that are interesting.
Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not gonna happen, right? Like,
some of these things I think might just be them trying to get us to look at these cards again. I do agree. I don't know what we're doing with natural talent, but they wanted to feel like they were having buffs, but not buff, except for potentially Rycleaver and Tsunami, which we'll get to, buff anything that like seems like it's going to be when they buffed Edwin right before the Masters Tour type of situation. So to keep it really high confidence. So speaking of
that is a point, right? Like, we have a Masters Tour coming up in a week and a half, and we could have waited to see, like, you're going to have the best players in the world extremely incentivized to break whatever of these cards are left afterwards, and maybe we wait for that until we start buffing. But anyway, that's it. I'm belaboring the point, but yeah. Speaking
of, we definitely should say there is a Masters Tour next weekend, August 16th, 17th. So absolutely check that out, because you may not hear our next podcast in time.
Well, and that probably is another source of the anxiety, right? Them wanting to make sure they showcase new cards, new decks for the MT, since that is the reason for their existence solely. And if people show up and they've nerfed a bunch of the new things, and then there's a bunch of old decks, that would look bad for them. So
Yeah.
Yeah. If the only way we're seeing new cards is through Excavate Rogue, then we have at the Masters Tour, then we have a problem.
So we also had a buff to Ranger Gilly, which is the hunter card that is a warrior tourist. And that went from 6 mana to 5 mana. That is the one that says, at the end of your turn, you get a 2/3 Crocolisk and Death Rattle. Give all minions in your hand +2/+3.
Cool.
Yeah. I did run into this deck before the patch once, and it seemed okay.
Yeah, you can yodeler that.
You can do it, but I mean, I think that giving that a little bit of help is probably fine. I think the fact that it doesn't have taunt is probably a bigger problem than the cost, to be honest, because how are you getting that 6 health Death Rattle to go off in a timely fashion, regardless of whether it costs 5 or 6? But yeah, it's a 5 mana 4/6. It needs some setup to come down. I honestly forgot what the card did until the patch notes came out. So, probably good to give it a little bit of a push.
I don't think that you're so much running Ranger Gilly for Ranger Gilly so much as you're running him because he's the tourist, and this makes him feel less like a dead card in your deck. It does give you eventually, some buffed Crocolisks, but the only time that I played him was in I think it was a Funky Monkey deck, so of course I went in with an asterisk. He makes very good decks, but off meta on purpose. And except for the few times, every once in a while, he breaks the meta by making an off meta deck that turns meta. But this deck was a Amalgam Hunter that we saw a lot of in theory crafting, and it really did feel powerful, except anything that stole it or transformed it, and you were just done. Because you were running just one so that you always pulled the correct one, which made a big difference, but anything happens to it and you just have to concede. Like, there's literally nothing else to do in this deck. So I think if we're doing something with Ranger Gilly, we have to be doing something a little bit more, like, less all-in, probably, than we were doing in theory crafting, where you have other things that you want to buff. But I know that there are some hunter enthusiasts in the community who will be, such as CDC, maybe Ron Mexico, who will hopefully find something, because I think a hand buff hunter warrior thing would be fun, but we just haven't seen anything like that be at all prevalent.
It's been rough out there for the hunters,
yeah,
for sure. So.
And it is notable that Rycleaver is also accessible for hunter, right? So maybe you argue, okay, it would have been fine at 7 in warrior that got the druid cards for ramp, but for hunter to have any shot at running Rycleaver, it being 5 is important. I could see that argument.
Yeah, I could get there. Yeah, like, I don't disagree with touching it. I just don't know, like, mana costs are more impactful than they look at first glance, but also the problems with a lot of these cards is with some of these cards was not the mana cost. We'll get to one that was super not the mana cost.
All right. Well, in Shaman, we had 2 buffs. Razzle Dazzler went from 7 mana to 6 mana. That is the Naga that says Battlecry, summon a random 5-cost minion, repeat for each spell school you've cast this game. And then, as we alluded to, Natural Talent, which was a 3-mana nature spell, get a random Naga and a random spell. It used to say they cost 1 less. Now it says they cost 2 less.
So, I don't know if you two have run into any Razzle Dazzlers.
I have not.
That card is good. Like, it was good before. It is a ton of stats. I think the issue is that Shaman got a lot of good cards. Like, it utilizes the Demon Hunter stuff better than Demon Hunter, and Frosty Decor is amazing. Malted Magma is pretty good. Like, I think, it's funny. I guess, yeah, a lot of its power has come out of Demon Hunter. It's like using half the Shaman cards and half the Demon Hunter cards. But if you did run into anyone doing the spell school thing, depending on the kind of deck you are, you could have Razzle Dazzler come down and just go, oh, that is like, 25 worth of stats. I'm dead now. But yeah, I think it's just like, it is trickier to make work. Natural Talent is not the nature spell that you want, because there are better options in Shaman. and it's just in this awkward spot of like, why would you work to do this when you could just be aggressive and also run Wave of Nostalgia?
I guess it's a different way to do it, right? Like, I mean, if you're running Cookie, you're always running Sigil of Skydiving. You could just run Skirting Death, which is a shadow spell. Sigil of Skydiving is a fel spell. You could just run Skirting Death, and then it's like it's something else. And maybe, you know, like I said, if we're taking out the muck pools, right? You change that deck like a little bit and work in Skirting Death, and then you work in Razzle Dazzler, and you're off to the races. Like, you're already running nature spells because you're a shaman. Right?
Yeah. You could do like Jam Session for fire.
Yeah, Jam Session is being run.
Yeah, some of them already run that, right? Like, so you can run or you could run Malted Magma if you really wanted to, right? I'm just looking at what other spells that they typically run. But I mean, Wave of Nostalgia is already a nature spell.
Right.
Which, you know, so that's already covered.
Could do, you know, you run Hagatha to draw Frosty Decor and Wave of Nostalgia. I know that means you won't get the spell school, but just like, you know, more utility and making a bunch of stuff. I mean, I think it going to 6 makes it more likely for people to want to find a way to squeeze it in there. But I think it's just like, they already have good stuff going on that it's sort of like, well, are we going to spend the energy to weave this one in? You know, maybe if it's not out of the way, but certainly for Death Knight. I mean, so they also put buttons from 5 mana 5/5 to 4 mana 4/4. And I honestly feel like the most likely use case for that is less Razzle Dazzler and more just like, I can Frosty Decor on curve.
Yeah.
I mean, so would you say that you feel that buttons has been pushed?
We will let it lie. I did run into someone doing something similar to what you had suggested with the Razzle Dazzler Wicked, where it was basically an Evolved Shaman, but they had the Razzle Dazzler, they had still Wave of Nostalgia, and they also had Caress Cabaret Star.
Oh, yeah. That's a card that hasn't seen any play.
And Skirting Death.
Yeah. You could run Chill Vibes too, right? That's a frost spell that doesn't cost 5. Like, you know, and it still makes a 3/3 if you're playing it with the finale. So that's not out of the question.
They got the one, deal 2 damage to all enemy minions, freeze 3 random enemy minions or something like that. Or
that
maybe
seems good.
Maybe it wasn't the freeze, but I think the deal 2 damage to all enemy minions is Fel, and they had Skirting Death. So, and the Skirting Death really did help them remove my board.
Skirting Death is Shadow.
Shadow.
Yeah, Fel's Sigil Skydiving.
So, and that card did seem like it worked well for them. It's definitely, I think, a little bit of it might be hard to get all of the swarm stuff in and do that, but Razzle Dazzler does make a board by itself that you could then, if it isn't a full, you know, you could then still throw a Sea Giant down with that, potentially.
Yeah, or it's likely to stick for the following turn, and then you just attack face and then Wave of Nostalgia, whatever's left over. So, you know, there's probably, there might be something there.
Yeah, but that's a case of like Razzle Dazzler already being powerful, and like, okay, now maybe people put it in the other stuff. But I sort of felt like, I think they pushed it to try and make it happen in Death Knight, and I don't think it's going to happen in Death Knight. Death Knight is going to do Corpsicle things.
Yeah.
That's the only spell school that Death Knight really cares about is Corpsicle.
the one spell school, the school of, you know, it's Death Knight's a sorcerer, not a wizard in D&D parlance. Don't have a lot of spells. Play them all over again. So, and we had already talked, you know, Natural Talent is the kind of spell where it's like, it's still 2 less is significantly better, but it's still a random Naga and a random spell.
Like, the Naga pool is small-ish, but I don't know. I don't think it is small enough, strong enough to be worth doing, right? When you can hit, like, Slither Spear, Sock Puppet Slither Spear, Tidepool Pupil, and since it's random, it's, like, not just your class. You can get the Amalgam, There's a bunch of like Demon Hunter ones that are okay.
Yeah, I mean, Mantle Shaper could be good, but like you could also hit Keyboard Soloist, which is like what are you doing with your life? Like Snake Eyes is fine. Snake Bite is less fine.
Like the only real high rolls are additional Razzle Dazzler, maybe Caress.
Yeah, and you could end up with like Snake Oil Seller. I guess that would be then a 2 mana 4/5, but you paid 3 mana to get it, so.
Oh, I forgot Merch Seller was a card.
Right? Yeah.
4 mana 3/5 at the end of your turn, put a random spell on the top of your opponent's deck. Yay.
That one's silly.
We did it.
I have seen that only through Cheeses summoning one. And it was actually aggravating when one got summoned against me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that seems like it's overripe, yeah.
So
I don't know. Like the Nagas are fine, but like you don't really need them. And like, okay, so you're getting a random spell that costs you less. Like there are better ways to do that.
yeah.
Particularly when like you can always get holy just by running that forge thing that heals you if you forge it, right? The 2-drop. Or
Right.
if you really want fell, you can run the 2-1 that gives you a sludge, right? Like there are some neutral ways now of getting different spell schools, and then also Shaman has the Siren Song to get 2 school spells you haven't played yet. But like natural talent, not where I'm going.
Some spells can just be filler for Yogg, right? It's okay. Like you don't need to buff everything to try to make it playable. I don't know.
In that vein.
In that vein, Cruise Captain Laura is a Druid Legendary. It went from 7 mana to 6 mana. This is the 4/5 pirate battlecry summon 2 random locations. You actually saw one of these.
I did, but it came off of Xerox Crown.
So we're still paying 6 mana for a Chillwind Yeti and 2 random locations of questionable value. I mean, I can't make the joke about you could just play a Prison of Yogg-Saron in your deck anymore because now it does cost less than the Prison of Yogg-Saron, I suppose. So that's an improvement, but like this is never going to be a good card, right? Like I don't even see the point of buffing it because like it's going to be a fun card. If you're at the point where you want to play it, you probably don't care that it costs 7. You're probably playing a million ramp spells and expecting to go to 16 or 19 mana anyway. And like it's I don't see the point of buffing this card. It's not going to be better at 6 than it is at 7. It's just going to be slightly less embarrassing, I suppose.
Part of the issue I think is that the low rolls clog up your board.
Yeah.
So if you get
for a while.
Yeah, if you get Jungle Gym, then for at least 3 turns, you've got this thing that's probably not doing much unless you happen to be running Beasts.
Or Mosh Pit, right?
And Mosh Pit also is at least 3 turns, and then some of them have 3 durability. Although those are mostly like Tide Pools you would be happy to get, but
Like the new ones are all pretty solid. But the fact that it includes the older locations as well, it's one of those things where I wonder, like, come rotation, are people going to look at the available locations and be like, oh man, this is actually the nuts now, right? Because you'll have lost a bunch of the sort of more niche ones. Although I guess it depends as well on things that are kept in core or not, right? Like depths and pools are core ones.
You're also going to lose things like Fan Club and Prison of Yogg-Saron out of the pool too, right? So it's like it's probably going to end up being around the same at the end of the day, but it's like
I don't see
know.
Prison as a plus for it being in there.
It depends. That's an exercise left up to the listener, I suppose. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's whatever. Like it's 6 mana. I don't see wanting to put that into a constructor deck. Maybe it's better for Arena. That's an argument, I suppose. If that's one of your first picks, maybe that's like better than a Blood Mage Thalnos in Arena as a first pick, or I don't know.
They do curate the pool somewhat, so I would hope that Thalnos is not.
Less so this season. Yeah,
Yeah.
less so this season. Or like, what's the anomaly one? Cho'Gall? Like,
I mean, I do think in Arena it would certainly be better than that because value is huge there, and you are getting a bunch of stuff.
Tempo is also huge there.
That's true.
6 mana 4/5
is not tempo, and I've been told that Arena is very different than when I last played it, which is a long time ago. More than just little bits.
6 mana 4/5 isn't even Slempo. It's just bad.
Okay, moving on.
We've alluded to this one a fair bit. Tsunami went from 8 mana and summoning 3 water elementals that attack random enemies. Now it is 10 mana and summons 4 water elementals that attack random enemies. 3/6 water elementals.
Yeah, it sure is.
This one bothers me the most because it's actually not even clear it's a buff. It costs 2 more mana. Like, I get that the highs are higher in specifically the case of going King Tide into this, or the your next spell you draw is cast when drawn.
Yeah, Surfalapod. Yeah.
Guess what? I'm not running Surfalapod because you need to run defensive cards. So don't do that. I like to actually have a chance against aggro, thank you very much. And so my big spell mage is a curated pool of spells for Galactic Protection Orb, and still runs Rising Tide and Lifeguard and Star Power, right? So yeah, I'm not a fan of this change because it makes it better for Druid than Mage.
Yeah.
It means you have to ramp or you have to cheat it out. Yeah.
And I think it was much nicer to me having that 8-cost spot filled with Tsunami. I was so happy. Remember when I was like, oh, I get to run an 8 that doesn't exist for me because I'm never running the Yogg-Saron card.
Oh no! Now you have to run the Yogg-Saron.
No. I'm not going to run it. I'm just, instead of missing a 10 since they buffed Sunset Volley, I'm missing an 8, right?
Yeah.
Because now Tsunami is the 10. This also means that Grillmaster is going to be a 50-50 of whether I get my Tsunami or my Protection Orb, which in some ways can be better, right? Because I'd rather hit Tsunami first. But it's just... It also means that if I discover it from the shadow spell where you
Void Scripture,
thank you.
Yeah.
You can no longer cast it that turn, right? So it'll still be good off Glyph, but not off Shadow Scripture. There's just so many mage reasons that I actually wish they had just left it, because this is not clear line better, right? I don't even want to list it under buffs. It's just changed mysteriously.
Yeah. And this is also another one where it's not clear that the card was the problem, right?
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
That deck was pushed out on both ends of the spectrum. It was pushed out by aggro that was trying to get under Unkileax, and then it wasn't enough damage to get through all the armor of a warrior and all of the Unkileaxes that are on the board, and it was going to get killed over the top by Druid. So it's not like the card ever had a chance because of the environment that it was in. That's why I feel like it was still a little bit premature to change that, because I don't know that the card was the problem in a warped meta like we had, right? I would have liked to see them let it breathe and try it out how it was before they started trying to push it, and I don't know if it made it better either.
If they wanted to make the big spell more effective, I mean, I am definitely not a card designer, but I almost wonder if having something like Surfalapod be less anti-synergistic, some way to target it, or I'm not sure how you change that card exactly, but
or have taunt. I'm sorry, you can't have these all in on something in your deck cards to do something big, just not have defensive duels, because there's a deck building restriction for cards like Under the Sea and Surflipod that you don't get to run your defensive tools of Rising Wave or to some extent even Star Power. Like, that's a 5-cost spell. It's big-ish, but it's not what you want to hit off these things. So if Under the Sea, draw a different spell, summon a random minion of the spell's cost, if it was instead like the 4-cost thing where you summon the cost stats with taunt, like, I would feel better about it. I guess random minion of the spell's cost, you could get a taunt, but you have no idea what you'll get. You get something awful as well. And Surflipod, like, it's a 5-mana 5/6, no defensive keywords. So you better hope that you draw a big spell that's going to be impactful soon.
Yeah. And also, if you are playing defensive spells with the Surflipod, you don't want to burn one of those on like an empty board.
Right.
You can't really control unless you're going to run Overplanner, and Overplanner, we're going to get to this later too. Overplanner is not making anything better, right? So if the only way to make the card playable is to run Overplanner, now you have 4 bad cards in your deck, and that's not improving the situation. So like the fact that you can't really control when you're going to draw the cast when drawn, and a lot of the big spells are things like Flame Strike, Blizzard, Star Power. Those are bad if there's not a board for them to clear, and if you can't control when they're going to come out, and they're getting excluded from the orb.
Or you're hitting the orb itself.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you really can play Surflipod in an orb deck. It just seems somewhat strangely at odds. And this is something that, when it was revealed that we talked about of if we're doing a big spell mage, is it really more of an orb mage? Maybe there's something that we haven't seen, but yeah, I think where we're going to see Tsunami more is Druid, Mista Vista, Ramp.
Yeah. I mean, the last time that we had a cast when drawn card was when it was a Druid card. It was the legendary. It said your next 3 spells are cast when drawn.
It was also bad.
Except in duels where it was broken because you would only play that right before you completed the priest quest.
Sure.
So it made your priest quest cast when drawn, and that one you're fine with playing it whenever. That one's okay.
That one you can't waste on an empty board.
Yeah.
Well, we also had one change to a paladin card, so Service Ace.
I need to mess around with this one because this is one I am kind of excited about, but haven't really tinkered with at all. The Sea Shanty deck has not manifested. This did not make it previously. Maybe it does now.
So it was a 3-mana 3/3. Now it is a 2-mana 2/3. After this minion gains attack, reduce the cost of the highest cost card in your hand by 1. I still think there might be some sort of... I know that World 8 has not completely given up on some sort of sea shanty paladin.
Yeah.
And maybe this also makes a sort of miracle rogue paladin if you can target, like, making the Linessa cost less or something like that. Then you can make her more effective.
Yeah, it's tricky. I want to try it with, like, the mage splashing for the paladin stuff. But
yeah,
certainly it is more enticing as 2 mana than as 3. Sorcerer's Apprentice and or Radiant Elemental, it is not. But I do think you could theoretically get in a situation where you, like, just have these 1-cost buff spells in your hand. And so you, like, play one on it, it makes another one free. You play that on it, it makes another one free. You play... Maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, like, a lot of the cheap mage spells that you're going to play to get things with Ryla, like, they're things like Primordial Glyph, like Void Scripture, that are giving you other spells. So being able to discount a spell that you generated down to the point where it's going to get you another minion from Ryla is probably reasonable. And, again, you need mana to do that, right? Because either you're playing a concierge alongside it, which just got nerfed and cost more, or you're just playing the spells fairly next to it, which means that you need mana alongside it to be able to pop off earlier. So being able to pop off a little bit earlier, that is, assuming that that's possible, I think is a good thing. I think it's interesting. I don't know if it's there yet. I don't know if that deck is there with what else is around, but I'm interested. I would like for that to be a thing. So we'll see what happens with it.
I am curious to try something like doing a more buff-centered service ace type deck that is Paladin Rogue, and so you run Linessa, but it's not like the deck is just Linessa OTK necessarily. That, like, you know, you're trying to make boards, but if you reduce her a bunch, you can double up on all these sunscreens and things, so.
Yeah, I think that was something that when I was working with a sunscreen paladin early in the expansion with World 8, we were like not even sure you run Linessa. But if you make her less expensive, then you can actually double up on more of your sunscreens with her at a point in the game when that really matters. And so and you're already running plenty of stuff that would increase the attack on service ace, or even if you're just reducing the cost of a lower cost, just anything in a more tempo focused deck, you don't really like the mana that I'm spending this turn is also going to essentially cheat me that much mana next turn. Like, great. So I think the fact that this is 2 mana means that you can do that a lot earlier. That makes that a lot more enticing. So I'm definitely curious about a sort of Naga Priest-esque paladin splashing into Rogue probably for draw with the Knick-Knack Shack and stuff like that. Is interesting. And it might still have some sort of Linessa damage spells, or might not. But even if you're just copying Divine Brews and Life-Saving Aura, like, copying Divine Brew with Linessa is actually insane.
Oh, it's pretty silly. But even if it's just like, I've got a cheap sea shanty, Linessa sea shanty, full board of 5/5s. Like, okay.
Seems good.
Seems good.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, sea shanty is not the issue in that deck, I don't think. Sea shanty's a good card.
Yeah.
Sea Shanty's good. It's just like you couldn't win with a board deck before because you'd have to plow through 1 million on Killiaxes that are going to heal them. So
Yeah.
maybe that's a little bit more viable now.
Yeah, and there's definitely lots of decks that I think are more viable with changes potentially. All right, Priest. I know you have a whole thing prepared. We'll start with the one that I think you have less of a thing to say about.
Yeah, I'm okay with the Nightshade Tea change. That's more palatable.
Nightshade Tea, the Priest drink went from 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion, to 1 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion. It still deals 2 damage to your hero as well, but now it is a lot cheaper. And I think that actually potentially helps a lot. I was seeing people experiment with self-damage Priest. The Sauna Regular is a good card, actually. That's the 5/5 taunt that costs 1 less for each time your hero has taken damage on your turn. And that's much better with this Nightshade Tea.
I would have liked to see the damage come down too.
Me too, actually.
Yeah.
If you're trying to use this, and you can use this in a control priest, but if you are doing that, like, it sucks having to take all that damage. And like now you can at least like 3 mana kill something from like that has 6 health with 1 drink. That's not nothing, right? Like that is kind of flexible, but you're also taking 6 to the face when you're doing that. So the minion that you're killing better have been a threat. And
or it's just a totem, which as Priest, you can sit there and watch their totem, draw them like 4 cards and gain them 8 armor before you can do anything about it.
Yeah, I guess, or their gold banner, I suppose, yeah.
Like, reducing the damage to 1, it's not like that negatively impacts the self-damage package. All of the things, like Sauna Regular only cares about instances, not amount.
Yeah.
I assume they just were like, we want this to have a steep cost for being such good card advantage, but I also think it could have been like, okay, if you're reducing the damage it deals, we also reduce the damage you take. But maybe they specifically didn't want it to be as powerful a tool in Control Priest. It is extremely potent for some kind of aggro deck, though, because now at 1 mana, it is 3 1-mana spells, which is great for our friend Thirsty Drifter.
Yeah. Yes, I do think there's got to be more sort of one-drop priest decks out there than just Zarimi. I think they're being choked out a little bit by the fact that like Zarimi is already mostly refined and good. But whether it's a self-damage priest or you're also running this in drifters and like some of the hunter stuff that cares about one-drops and doing that, like there's gotta be, I'm still convinced there's gotta be something there. And yeah, discounting your drifters is important. And it also works with all of those hunter one-cost things as well. Although I don't know that you really want to repeat this with the parrot. Yeah. You can't aim it and it's dealing 2 damage to you. Yeah. The other change that they made was that Twilight Medium went from a 6 mana 5/6 to a 5 mana 4/5. That was the card that says Taunt, Battlecry, set the cost of the top card of your deck to 1.
Yep. Sure. I'm still not going to play it. It's still not good. It comes down earlier, but it's still overcosted for what it does, and it's not really doing anything. Like, again, unless you have exactly Narain Sooth Fancy in your hand when you, or have played rather, so that you have the fortunes in your hand when you play this does nothing for you. Like, I've played this and gotten a 1-cost card and been extremely sad. And again, if your answer is, well, you can play Overplanner, now you have 4 bad cards in your deck. and you have to have played them one after the other, which is not going to happen as often as you would like to think that it would. So, yeah.
Setting to 1, if you just have a deck of a bunch of expensive things, can be extremely powerful. And like, maybe you just accept the risk of like sometimes it's going to swing things extremely high, sometimes it's not. But if you get like a 1-cost Reno, a 1-cost Elise, etc., it could just be insane and swing games. But yeah,
and you don't necessarily run 2 because you want the Narain Sooth Fancy. Like maybe you just run Narain and 1 Twilight Medium, right? Like, because of the potential high roll, but it's a much higher roll. Like if you play Narain and then you see like, oh man, you probably have to wait till 6. He's like, oh man, I have Elise on the top of my deck and I can basically get 2 1-mana Elises now, right? But yeah, maybe you just play fewer of them. I don't necessarily know that we're never playing it. I think you definitely, though, have to be like willing to risk that sometimes you just play. At least it has Taunt. I actually think that does make a big difference.
Yeah.
So does Time Lost Protodrake for the same stats and it costs 4, right? Like it's like, because basically this is a taunt that sometimes will do something that matters in like a third of your games. And I just like, if you're playing a Reno deck, you're not going to like, then you're only going to have one of these and the Narain, and then it's even worse. If you're not playing a Reno deck, you're doing something like Overheal Priest, which is effectively a control deck at this point. And you don't have room for this because you need to be doing other synergistic things that you're doing as a 2 of. So I just don't know why this card exists. And I don't think that the cost of it is the problem. The problem is that it doesn't have enough support to make that effect matter enough to be worth the opportunity cost of putting it in your deck.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what it is.
So I think it's one of those situations where it's like they made this as a thing that also fits with a kind of archetype in Demon Hunter, because Demon Hunter has the big stuff archetype. Although even there, it's awkward because Cliff Dive, I think that's what it's called, pulls 2 minions from your deck. Well, you don't want Twilight Medium to be one of those minions.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do want to acknowledge JT Snow in the comments has really been experimenting a lot with various somewhat higher cost, like higher curve shopper Demon Hunters. And if you do get a 1-cost shopper or a 1-cost Argus, that's very good. I mean, it might be kind of a thing where like the highs are so high And if most of your deck is more than one,
Yeah. I'm just not about that gambling life.
Yeah, I will say, and maybe this is not a control priest card, and I will concede that point. But as a control priest player, I am looking for consistency, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not looking to high roll. I think a lot of people have this misconception that control priest is looking to just generate removal, and that's not control priest. That's excavate rogue. That's what that is. Control priest wants to have answers, and it wants to be able to answer things on the board, and it wants to know what it's going to be getting and plan out its turns. And this is just okay, well, I'm going to roll the dice, and that's if I'm at that point, I don't think that's the thing. That's the thing that you really want at the cost of being able to put another answer in your deck that's more reliable, right? Maybe you just need to bring the curve of your deck down if that's what you need. But and again, in Demon Hunter, maybe it's a different discussion. Because you do have things that care about the cost, like Shopper, where if you can hit that, great, but also how often are you actually hitting that? I think the important thing is to not. The problem with evaluating a card like this is that you have to temper the high rolls with the average result of the card. Is it going to high roll occasionally? Absolutely. That's the point of the card. Are you going to be able to get an average result that is that is worth putting it in the cost? I don't think so, right? I would argue 30% of the time you're gonna draw a cheap card that it's not gonna matter. 30% of the time, but you're gonna draw this late, you're gonna have 10 mana, and it doesn't really matter if you draw even a 4 or a 5 cost card, because you could have played it anyway because you're top decking, right? Or you're gonna top decking at the end and you have 10 mana and that's the only card you could play anyway, and it costs 1, big deal. You could have cast it for 10 and it wouldn't matter. So it's really only when you get this early, which means you need to be running 2 of them, and you draw something that's really significantly discounted, that you can actually play, that's not situational, right? That makes an impact. And how often is that really happening? Yeah, there will be high rolls. I don't think it's going to matter without some other way, like Narain, to know what you're going to get and then time it appropriately. But even then, it's it requires so much setup that I just don't know if it's worth it. Now, if this card said set it to 1 and draw it, okay, I'm in. It could not set it to 1 and draw, and I would play it because priest needs card draw that badly.
Sure. Well, and,
Right,
and
yeah.
then lowering the mana cost by 1, if it draws it, then the actual cost of this card is often going to be when you can play it and what you draw in the same turn.
Well, maybe that's part
Right,
of what
yeah.
makes it potentially make more sense in Demon Hunter, because Demon Hunter does not have the same kind of card draw problem that Priest
Right.
does. And so you're going to be getting whatever is cheap
I mean,
quite quickly.
quick pick.
Right?
Yeah.
You can draw it right then with Quick Pick without even paying anything. So, and you can also run Narain along with it. And if it's, I think you probably only want to be playing this if you want to be running Narain anyway, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're running Narain no matter what.
Yeah.
I think Narain is as close to an auto include as you can get.
So, anyway, we have one more change, which is Conniving Conman in Rogue. This was the 4-mana 4/4 pirate, Battlecry. Replay the last card you've played. It used to say from another class. Now it says from a non-rogue class.
So that means that Paladin can use this and then replay a Paladin card.
Yeah, you could
That's
get
what
another
that-
sea shanty or something.
Yes. And that's probably specifically what they were going for, right? Play another sea shanty. Maybe we do it then. I honestly would have loved if it was the same wording as before, but just let it play itself. I legit thought that when this was revealed, the way it would work in Paladin is just you would get 2 4/4s. And then that would work with the hand buff theme, right? Because then you're basically getting... Well, I guess even then it would be a base copy, but I don't know. It would be a bunch of stats, which would be sort of Paladin-y on the rogue card. But yeah, this is another one where it's maybe we'll find a use for it. Maybe it's just still not played. I don't know.
I do love the fact that the rogue card was buffed exclusively for being played outside.
I mean,
that does make me happy.
It does also mean that if you somehow generate this, you're like in any other class, it'll do something, right? Assuming you didn't just summon it to the board, then obviously it doesn't do anything, but so do like most cards. If you somehow end up with this in your hand in any class, but then you're like, besides rogue, then you're like, okay, it does something. And potentially something powerful. So they do sometimes, I think, make changes partly with Discover in mind, but I think this was probably mostly aimed at Paladin. And I do think they want that sea shanty deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they clearly do. So I mean, that's okay though. I mean, like that would be fine. I also would like for that sea shanty deck to work. So I'm not upset about that.
Yeah.
As long as Rogue's not getting the benefit of the buff, then
I'll get cracking after the episode to figure something out.
Yep. So that was all of the card choices, or I mean the card changes. They had said basically they wanted, their main goal with this patch was to add more competitive options from Perils and Paradise by curbing a few cards that are showing up too often and buffing some new cards that have room to improve. And they said that they will see how the meta reacts and make further adjustments if needed in about 3 weeks. And there were also, we can look at some of the things that they said about, they didn't really say a lot specifically about any given buff, but they basically just said we've noticed some of the archetypes in Perils and Paradise didn't land where we wanted them to. And because they gave themselves more time, they say they have more confidence to take a few swings at underperforming cards and archetypes. But I think that might be part of why a lot of these cards were sort of safer bets.
Yeah.
And then we still have not fixed the Mac bug, but the word on the street is that they are hopefully going to be able to have that on the Battlegrounds patch, which is coming soon. Don't have that completely confirmed, but that is apparently the goal timeline for a fix of the Mac crash bug. They did fix a couple of small other bugs. Pitting Carefree Cookie and Bayfin Bodybuilder against each other will no longer cause an infinite loop and crash. Now Bodybuilder is capped at 15.
A battle of the ages. And they fixed Language Hacker's name in the Mage deck title. That was very important. They didn't have his name capitalized.
And they fixed a bug where players could get Demolition Renovator from random standard card grant rewards like end of season rewards and arena winnings. So if that was you, you will be given a compensatory dust grant in an update after the patch is live.
And I don't want to seem like we're super down on all this. Like, I am very excited about the things that got nerfed being nerfed and to try all the new stuff and sort of see where things go. I think it was just like we were surprised both that buffs would be happening and then a little kind of confused and or perturbed at some of the choices. But, largely I get where their head's at, what their goals are, and I mean, I would have been excited for just the nerfs, and at least so far, with the bit of ladder that I played and I saw Megasa play earlier, it didn't seem like anything egregious has cropped up yet. Like,
it's been 6 hours, right?
Yeah.
8 hours.
But also,
there's time.
I think the nerfs will hopefully give us a lot more breathing room, and the buffs, the fact that, maybe with the exception of Tsunami, like, the fail state is probably they don't do enough, rather than we have Edwin buffed and completely destroying the Master's Door. So, and hopefully it gets people to try out some more things. JT Snow in the comments says, I just saw Wheel of Death, ladder is healing.
Okay. There you go.
That's how we know
we did it.
Game is
we
thriving.
Did it, everybody.
Is it healing, or does it just mean people are playing slow things?
I definitely saw a lot more slow things. I saw a couple of control priests, and I was like, oh no.
Not like this. Not like this.
And, also to be clear of something from last week, just to we were talking a lot about some of the reaction that people have had to the looking forward post, and I wanted to just make sure that we were clear. Like, we do not think the game is dying, right? We just wanted to say that we understand why people are concerned, really, and that there are some directions that we're not thrilled with, but like clearly the game has a lot of support right now. The fact we're opening up in China is great, and I am excited about these changes. So just wanted to make sure that was clear.
And I think that like part of this is also there's a little bit more anxiousness with buffs than there are with nerfs, because nerfs you kind of have an idea of what's going to happen. With buffs, very often you end up, because buffs are just like trying to insert a card into the card pool instead of taking something out, so the impact has to be a lot higher. So the temptation is to shoot for a 10, and when you shoot for a 10, sometimes you hit an 8 and sometimes you hit a 12. And that's why I'm a little bit nervous about them making some of the buffs that they made when we just came out of a very warped meta.
Yeah.
Where it's not really clear if the problem was the cards or the problem was just like that there were certain strategies that were invalid because of the meta that we were in. So, and it seems to be a little bit at odds of the approach they took with the nerfs, which I appreciated, which is them taking a little bit more time to make sure they got them right. And I felt like that maybe that should have applied to the buffs too, because normally we don't get buffs this early either. So it felt like almost too soon for buffs, given that we're taking more time to get the data to get the nerfs right. But we'll see what happens. I want to be wrong. I absolutely want to be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Too. And there is experimentation, but that'll wrap us up.
So we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at Concede.com. You can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/Concede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.concede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.concede.com. And write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. And if you'd like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Coinconcedes.
Well, I hate that I'm making the same the same style of coin concede. What I think is a couple weeks in a row, but coin conceding to the Hearth Casual folks who have also ended their run this week. So another one of our comrades in the space, taking their final bow. But Rowan and Wicked Kitten have been doing this for quite a while, and appreciate all the work that they've been doing in the space. And I hope that this leaves them free to do other kinds of content around Hearthstone or whatever they're looking to do. So, best of luck to them in whatever they're doing next.
I will coin concede to my partner for helping with this push to clean the apartment.
Really didn't have to do that.
Well, we at the very least needed to vacuum because we have a long-haired cat whose hair, literally, we vacuumed, and the next morning, I picked up 2 tufts of hair off the floor. So, and she's not even allowed in the bedrooms, still was cat hair. So, we got that, and then while we're at it, we may as well put stuff away and clean up a little bit. ADHD does not make me the neatest housekeeper at times. But yeah, my partner was very helpful, despite having, I think, some long days of work this week. And I very much appreciate that. And thank you also for coming out to California. I'm really excited. We're going to do an escape room because I have to have a really nerdy bachelorette party. I have never done an escape room before, actually. So
I mean, you're not LARPing, so I don't know how nerdy it actually is. I think that seems you could have gone harder, if you really wanted to.
Could have gone down to SoCal, where my friend goes to the same LARP that Brian Kibler goes to.
I mean, that's kind of a hardcore LARP for newbies, but
yeah. It is. I mean, they were very welcoming. I actually went to their fighter practice, which was an in-costume fighter practice because they were doing some filming. They were super friendly. They were trying to convince me that it'd be totally great to come down 8-hour drive every month to do this. They're like, you can just get a sub. It'll be fine. But I also realized that I am a terrible fighter and it would be extremely stressful for me. I mean, yes, you can specialize in things other than combat, but there's a lot of running and dying. So, but my friend loves it. She was actually very funny because she didn't really know who Kibler was, or was only like vaguely aware that he was in Magic the Gathering. And so she goes, "Oh yeah, there's this guy at my fighter practice who plays Hearthstone. I think he's a streamer, you know." So I say, "Oh, what's his name? I might have heard of him." She goes, "Brian Kibler."
Like,
I have definitely heard of him.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, I've heard of him once or twice. Yeah.
well, I'm going to concede to Magesa, sitting next to me, for hosting me. It's always nice to be able to travel and not have to worry about lodging. So, and then concede to my flight attendant today, who I offered to swap seats with the father of this family. You know, they had this situation of like, the mom had a seat with the kid, but then he was having to sit further up the plane. I was like, I'm here solo. This is literally the back of the plane, like, you know, row 30. I will happily swap with you, who is a dozen or so seats further up the plane. And the guy was grateful. I was like, this is a great deal for me. And the flight attendant was like, oh, that was so nice of you, swapping seats. Here, have a complimentary, you know, something off the snack menu. And I'm just sitting here like, I mean, it was a good deal for me already. So, yeah. I can see to that flight attendant. Got a little more food in me from that.
Well, that is going to do it for us for this week. So until next time, keep calm and get your dust refunds. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
All life must end. I yield for now. I concede. Well fought. I concede.
You win this one.
The victory is yours.
You have bested me.
I give up.
You win this one, friend. You win this time. I choose death.